please subscribe and don't forget to press the bell icon to get notified whenever we upload a new video.
Good afternoon, hello and welcome to a fresh new edition of MIDCAP Radars. The market is bouncing 72 odd points. It looked like it was giving up gains. It's still off the high, but not by much, about 10-12 odd points or so. But the fact is we're up 70 good points. I mean, you could call it, Anisha is with me. Anisha, hi, good afternoon. One can call it the magic of 8, as someone called it. The reason is because, I mean, just a pure coincidence, no great deep meaning behind it. But this is the third instance in the last 6 months when we've had corrections of 300, 400 points and which have lasted 8 days.
Oh.
And so, you know, August the market sold off 8 days, September the market sold off 8 days. And basically, on the 9th day, the market rebounded. I mean, you know, just a bit of trivia might not imply very much beyond that.
Well, yes, we'll have to wait by and see how the markets end because the last hour of trade has been really decisive over the last few days. Let's see how today pans out. But first up, let's run you through the top headlines at this hour. Then, market rebounds after 3 days of losses, extend gains to trade near day's high. Sensex reclaims 33,000 mark. Nifty adds 70 points while the mid-caps gain over 0.5%.
CNBC TV18 brings you the exclusive coverage of the biggest conferences, UBS and Macquarie. While UBS believes recovery in the investment cycle in India will be the key thing to watch out for, Macquarie expects the second half of financial year 18 this year to be better than the first one.
Westlife Development and Jubilant Food hike prices of certain products post the GST rate cut. Westlife tells CNBC TV18 that the real tax levy on them is not 5% but almost 12 to 13% as the withdrawal of input tax credit has increased their costs. Specialty Restaurant says they will be compelled to raise the prices of products post the GST rate cut.
IIFL subsidiary 5 Paisa's listing stumps investors, raises questions on the price discovery mechanism in the pre-open trading. The stock lists and moves immediately to the 5% lower circuit at 380 rupees on the NSE, but it's at 617.5 rupees on circuit on the BSE. Okay, I think we have European markets opening as well. So let's just quickly put up the rates which we are getting out of Europe. So about, well, a third of a percent higher on the CAC, the FTSE, the UK market is up about 0.1. We're going to look at the German DAX and a few others, the Italian market, for example, etc. But I mean, it's a slightly higher start. There's nothing really going on out there in Europe. Remember, overnight market sold off, but I mean, US futures, for example, have been pointing to a slightly higher start anyway in the last few hours. I just want to quickly highlight PNB just to back with our markets and maybe, you know, a couple of other large PSU bank stocks, because there was a news flash just under an hour back that the government is going to essentially announce the structure of the PSU bank recap. I mean, basically, you know, how the recap is going to happen, what will the bonds be like, you know, what kind of status will they have, SLR, non-SLR, all those kinds of things. So the mechanism itself, I mean, how this money is going to be delivered and what it would mean for banks, I think that should be out soon. That essentially was a news flash quoting government officials. PNB has climbed as we speak. It's up 4.5%. Look at that. And it's zooming. I mean, if you can look at SBI as well and maybe Bank of Baroda, just the 3 largest PSU names, it should be instructive to see whether this is just PNB. Oh, no, it is not. Look at SBI. It's up 1.5%. And I think we're also starting to get Bank of Baroda. Maybe we can take a quick look. It's also shot up about 2.5%. And if you look at the Nifty PSU Bank Index, it should show up easily with what's happening with these 3 large PSU names. The Nifty PSU Bank Index has shot up about 1.9%. I mean, actually, we should have some of these stocks, at least these 3 and maybe a Bank of India, which is one of the larger PSU names at the bottom of the screen, just to track what's happening in these stocks. All right, let's bring in Ashwani Gujral right on the top of the show, as always. Ashwani, thanks very much. Good to have you here. I mean, first, I mean, a quick comment on what's happening with PSU banks and, you know, banks generally.
Well, PSU banks, you know, a lot of them are consolidating ever since that day of the recap. So overall, Bank Nifty remains extremely strong, and private banks have already done well today. PSU banks are showing some rearguard action. But overall on the market, I think with Reliance, IT as well as banks doing well, I see very little chance of 10,100 yesterday's low thereabouts getting broken unless global markets kind of fall out of bed. So that way, my sense is that probably the worst is over, and people should build positions in strong stocks now, and possibly we are likely to test at least previous highs. Again, the caveat is the global correction is also over. As far as individual stocks are concerned, RIL is a buy with a stop of 890, target of 930. And this is a fairly decent correction, 5 to 7% correction on RIL that people should buy, those who want to hold it for long term. Voltas is a buy with a stop of 600, target of 635. And Infosys is a buy with a stop of 970, target of 1010.
You looked at GAIL, Ashwani. Numbers were super strong. Stock's done well. It's come off a little bit from the highs. And also Shriram Transport. I mean, basically, again, numbers were very strong, upgrades, etc. But basically, the stock is still at where it was before the results. Exactly at that level, actually.
See, GAIL is not my favorite gas stock. I think Petronet, IGL, MGL, etc. outperform GAIL in that regard. But overall, gas seems to be doing well. Shriram Transport, again, there's lots of volatility in this stock, so not the best stock to trade. But since it's in some sort of an uptrend, I think these are levels where you can buy with a stop, say around 1150, and maybe 1500 are decent targets. One bank I want to point out is Indian Bank in terms of PSUs, which was down for last 3 odd sessions. Today, along with the other PSU banks, is moving up. So that is the PSU bank that people should look at.
Okay, Ashwani, so thank you for all those stock picks. But moving on then, UBS remains overweight on India. That's the word coming in from Jeffrey Dennis, the head of Global Emerging Markets at UBS. Speaking to Anand Singhal from the sidelines of the conference earlier today, he adds that India is a classic emerging market story.
Frankly, markets have gone up a lot this year, of course, and the US has gone up a lot since the election almost exactly a year ago. But the point that we've made to people is that in early September, the dollar stopped falling, began to rally a little bit, and that's led to the inevitable pressure on certain countries which are perceived to have weaker fundamentals, weaker currencies. So you've seen a lot of selling in Latin America, a lot of selling in parts of EMEA, Turkey and South Africa. But at the same time, what's been very interesting is Asia has continued to do well. Now, I know you've seen a little bit of weakness in the rupee over that period, but Asia has continued to do well. So it's almost like the tech sector, which has been the big driver in emerging markets this year, and markets like China and Korea have kept going, whereas you've seen some risk taken off the table in some of these other emerging markets. And so what matters, I think, from here is what is the general trend of global growth, what's the general trend of earnings growth going forward, but also we as a house that the dollar's going to start to go down again eventually over the medium to long term, and I think that will bring that liquidity back into EM. And so we're not particularly bothered by this pullback because it's been fairly small.
It's been fairly small. There's been some concern about what's happening in China as well, Jeffrey. Of course, the US bond yield, that's something that we've looked at over the last couple of days. At what point do you think the emerging market story will be a buy story again? Is it already there? Or do you think maybe some more correction and then...
I think it's definitely a buy for the long term. I wouldn't try to be clever enough to try to pick, the actual buying point on a shorter term basis. I think that one of the things we have to absorb, which is going to be a challenge for emerging markets as you go forward, is that the Chinese economy will slow down next year. I mean, one of the interesting things about this year is the Chinese economy has been considerably stronger than we all thought it would be 12 months ago. And this has been a very big driver of emerging markets in 2017. Now, going forward, we have that slowdown forecast again, 6.8 to 6.4. And the pullback just in the last couple of days has been, frankly, because the Chinese data, most recent data, has been on the soft side. So I think as long as the slowdown in China is modest, which is what our forecast would indicate, and as long as US bond yields stay within a manageable range, which again is the house view, we don't see bond yields in the US going any higher than 2.7% by the end of next year. Okay. I think it'll just be a question of when you start to see the buying coming back in. And we're certainly optimistic for EM equities next year, although I don't think we're going to have another 30% year. It feels to us like more of a 10% year next year, but we're definitely constructive.
And where would India rank in your pecking order right now?
We're still overweight. Now, I think the way to look at it, frankly, is that, and Gautam will talk about this, of course, you've seen some local liquidity helping to drive the markets. We think that GEMS investors are beginning to reduce their overweights in India. And I think it's a question of sort of stacking up the short-term pressure on growth, which is clearly there, and will that recover, which is obviously what we think will happen. Tanvi will talk about that, I'm sure. How challenged the short-term economy is compared to the longer-term story, which is still very good. I mean, if you look at it over the long term, India is still the best growth story in the emerging market index. I think that's what people are looking at. They're wondering at what point do you start to, eventually come back into the market. But frankly, it's pretty expensive right now. But we're still long-term overweight.
Okay, so Nifty is sitting comfortably around that 10,195 mark. But one space that has been doing well, and we have been talking about it, is the PSU banks. We have SBI, PNB and BOB doing well. And from the broader markets, we have bank gaining in trade. Another space that is doing well is the liquor space. So look at Global Spirits, Redico Khaitan, MP Distilleries, all are up anywhere between 6 to 16%. But one stock which is also gaining in trade today is Star Paper. And to discuss more about the business fundamentals, we are now joined by JP Goenka, the chairman of Star Paper Mills. Mr. Goenka, thank you so much for joining us. First up, tell us how's the overall demand outlook looking in the industry. Is it that the packaging paper is doing better, or is it the craft paper and the writing paper which is doing better? And what is the overall target for the year?
Well, I think generally paper industry is in for reasonably okay times. It's not as if it's growing very radically, but it's growing. And I think prospects, at least for the next year or so, appears to be reasonably good. We are very bullish on, certainly on Star, we are very bullish.
Right. Mr. Goenka, I mean, you will report numbers for the second quarter on the 23rd, which is Thursday, so we won't talk numbers specifically. But, I mean, how has business been so far, even till now, I mean, which is mid-November now?
Reasonably favorable.
Okay, sir, can you also tell us about the current capacity utilization? Are you looking to expand it? The last time we had talked, you said the capacity utilization was around 100% level?
Yeah, it is close to 100%, and you see, what we are trying to do is to modernize. So more than into value-added products rather than increasing the capacity.
And could you give some more sort of, where are you in that process of modernizing? Will it take, how long will it take?
Well,
or is it a continuous
I think
process?
Our banking facilities, etc., should be through over the next few weeks, and thereafter we have already identified the products that we want, and including the equipment that we are wanting to take. So it's just waiting for the funding to be organized, and we go ahead.
No, so essentially you're saying new product categories you want to get into.
Well, into
that you're not
value-added products.
That you're not, this could be new that you don't produce currently, right?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, otherwise, I'm increasing capacity. That is one thing, but we are preferring to convert our equipment in our processes into value-added products.
I mean, what would you sort of throw in the bucket of value-added products? I mean, just for some idea.
Well, for a given idea, we do not produce tissue paper, for example.
Right.
So I mean, things like that. It's a range of other products that we are wanting to introduce. The concentration will be purely on value-added as well as on getting the efficiencies right.
Okay, so you mentioned that you're looking for additional funding for it. So what is the amount that you're looking at, and what is the debt currently? What will it go up to?
Well, currently we have a working capital debt of about 25 crores, which is neither here nor there. It's and we don't have a term debt. So we really are looking for having a total, the project, the first phase of project would be about 150 crores, out of which debt would, at best, will hover around 60, 65, around that level. The rest would be internal.
So 60, 65 you'll raise additionally from banks, basically?
Well, either banks or other sources. So probably will be from other sources other than banks.
So bond market, etc. could be?
Yeah, we're really not too enamored of Indian banking system at this point of time.
Okay. Okay. No, I just, so, and the rest is essentially internal accruals, you're saying?
Yep.
Fair enough. Now, just one quick point, just to go back to that value-added question. I mean, as of now, I mean, would you, what, I mean, out of the total revenues in any given year, what percentage comes from what you would categorize as value-added currently?
Well, currently, I mean, value-added is...
Are you there, Mr. Goenka?
30%.
30%.
30% extra compared to the current.
30% of the total revenue, and you're saying that any and all future expansion essentially would focus on that segment, value-added. Margins, I'm assuming, are much higher.
And cost cutting. Reducing our costing substantially.
All right, we look forward to speaking with you when the numbers come out. That's next week, Thursday. Appreciate you joining us and taking some questions, Mr. Goenka. Stock, which was basically falling for the last, 5 or 6 trading sessions, has come back roaring. It's not very far away, by the way. It's from its all-time high. I think the all-time high is about 240, 250, about 212 with this 8-9% jump. Let's take another very quick break here. We come back. By the way, the rally in public sector banks is sort of well and truly on. So I just want to leave you with what's happening there. I mean, PNB is up now 4.5. Indian, and by the way, I'm just mentioning these stocks in the order of gains. PNB, Indian Bank 4%, Oriental Bank of Commerce 3.5, Union Bank 3.25, Canara Bank 3.25, Syndicate Bank 3, Allahabad Bank 3, Bank of Baroda under 3%. So, you know, across the board, big gains, and I think you can see that in the PSU Bank Index as well. 72 points on the Nifty. We're at about 10,188. Lots of stocks moving around. PSU Banks on the higher side. Mahanagar Gas, as the flash indicates, on the lower side, 3.25 lower. Shree Cement's reported a mixed bag of earnings for the second quarter, but the company's management is confident that cement demand will see double-digit growth over the next 3 years. Here is a piece of that conversation that Kevin Lee, my colleague, had with the management. Listen in.
Projects like roads, canals, airports, government is doing a great job. But still the cement demand is not picking up, primarily due to the organized housing. Because of the sudden disruption in the way the housing sector was doing, people are not buying houses and the builders are not able to consume cement. So that is the low side. Overall, we are happy with the situation and I expect good times ahead.
If you had to put a number on how fast you expect cement demand specifically in India to grow over the next 2-3 years, agree with your point that because of disruptions, the real estate industry, which is a big consumer of cement, hasn't really been able to pick up in terms of new launches. But with programs like affordable housing, etc. coming in, what is the pace you expect the cement demand to grow over the next 2 or 3 years?
If I have a vision of 2 to 3 years, it is almost sure, I will give 9 out of 10 points that the cement demand will grow about 15% in 3 years' time.
And from a Shree Cement point of view, what is the company focusing on now? Is there a chance that you may foray into more geographies in India? Are you looking at inorganic growth? Because you've focused on steady organic growth over the last few years. What is the plan of action for Shree Cements going forward?
Our aim will be to migrate to different geography, both in India and abroad.
Which geographies are you looking at in India to migrate to?
In India, now for cement, it is the 5 geography, north, east, west, south, central. We are already big in north. We have started in east. Now we are going to south. And our next 1 year, our south production will be in full swing. And then we will like to go to west and central. So we will like to be a pan-India player.
And outside India, you spoke about expanding there. What are the countries that you're targeting outside India?
We are looking at the Indian Ocean rim, that is from the Middle East, East Africa, or the Southeast Asia.
Okay, that's Sri Cement's management. Markets, by the way, given up about 6 or 8 points. We're up 68 now on the Nifty. It's a wrap here on this edition of MidCap Radar. From everyone here, thanks very much for staying with us.